Rain swept across the Montana Valley so hard, it looked like the sky was breaking open. Silas rode with his hat pulled low, barely able to see his horse's ears through the sheets of water. He was used to storms. He was used to loneliness too. But he had never seen anything like the shape he spotted on the roadside that day. A small figure huddled in the mud. A woman, soaked through, barely sitting upright. Silas pulled the reins and slowed his horse. The closer he got, the more the sight tightened his chest. Her dress clung to her thin frame. Mud coated the hem. Her shoes had worn through at the bottom, the skin of her feet showing through the broken leather. She held a small valise in both hands, like it was the last thing she owned in the world. She looked up at him. Her brown eyes were red around the edges, not from crying, but from days without tears left to give. "Where you headed?" Silas asked. His voice came out rough from disuse. She stared at him through the pounding rain. "I don't know anymore." Her answer hit him harder than the storm. Behind them, the town was 5 miles of mud. His cabin was only 1 mile away. He looked toward the road, then back at her shaking form. Something old and half-buried stirred in him, something he had tried to forget existed. He reached down his hand. They say kindness shows up when we need it most. Sometimes it comes wearing a muddy hat, with a man who doesn't speak much, but means what he says. Silas lifted her onto his horse and rode through the storm toward his cabin, the weight of her shivering body leaning against him. Inside, the place smelled of wood smoke and neglect. Dishes sat in the basin with old beans dried on the edges. Dust lined the windows so thick it looked like frost. He had been living alone so long, he hardly noticed the mess anymore. He knelt by the stove and fed it kindling until the fire caught. Behind him, the woman stood dripping onto his floor, her arms wrapped tight around herself, her valise held against her ribs like a shield. Silas grabbed a wool blanket and held it out without looking at her face. "Get warm." She took it, her cold fingers brushing his. He poured black coffee into a tin cup and set it near the fire. She wrapped both hands around it, and he saw how badly they trembled. She hadn't eaten right in days. Anyone could see that. Silas sat across from her. Steam rose from her dress as it dried. The smell of wet wool filled the room, mixed with a faint trace of lavender that must have clung to her clothes from another life. She finally spoke. "Ohio," she whispered. "My folks died when I was 17. Scarlet fever took them the same week." Silas nodded. He didn't speak. He knew loss, too. "I worked in a sewing factory," she said, 12 hours a day. Then I saw the advertisement. A Montana rancher seeking a wife. Hard-working and sincere. We wrote letters for 3 months. Her hands tightened around the cup. Her voice stayed low, steady, like she was telling someone else's story. "He said he'd meet me at the Willow Creek Depot, said he'd be wearing a blue kerchief." She swallowed hard. "I sold everything for a train ticket. There was no going back." 2 days at the depot, sleeping on a bench, no husband, no blue kerchief, no promise waiting for her. "So I started walking," she said. 40 miles, 3 days. One woman gave me bread. That was all. Her fingers moved to the clasp of the valise. She opened it and pulled out a stack of letters tied with kitchen string. The paper was soft from rain, the ink smudged. His name was James Hollister. He said he had a ranch. Silas froze. James Hollister ran the mercantile in town. He had a wife, 2 children, a perfect white fence, and he had never owned a ranch in his life. Faith watched him closely. "You know him." Silas nodded once. "He's got a family." The fire crackled. Rain hammered the roof. Faith didn't break. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She stood, walked to the stove, and fed the letters into the flames one by one. The ink curled. The paper blackened. 3 months of lies burned away in seconds. "You can stay," Silas said, "as long as you need." She didn't answer. She watched the last piece of paper turn to ash. Faith slept through most of the next day. Silas checked on her twice. She lay curled beneath the wool blanket, breathing deep and even. Her body was paying the debt of 40 miles through country that didn't care whether she lived or died. When she finally came out the next morning, Silas woke to a smell he hadn't known in years. Cornbread. She stood at the stove with her hair pinned up tight and an old apron around her waist. The table was clean. The basin was empty. The dishes were stacked neatly. His cabin didn't look like his cabin anymore. "I don't take charity," she said, without turning around. "I work for my keep." Silas sat at the table and ate without speaking. It tasted like something he had lost a long time ago. 5 days passed before Faith spoke more than a handful of words at a time. She worked with quiet purpose, cleaning what Silas hadn't touched in months. She mended shirts he had forgotten he even owned. She learned the rhythm of the land without needing to be told. But something stayed locked behind her eyes, something that had been broken long before she walked into his cabin. On the 10th morning, she surprised him. "Mr. Silas," she said at breakfast, "may I plant some flowers by the porch?" He paused with his coffee halfway to his mouth. No one had asked him for anything in years, not even a small thing like flowers. "Plant what you want," he said. That afternoon he watched her from the fence line. She knelt in the dirt with his old hand spade, sleeves rolled past her elbows, digging small holes with care. Morning sun fell across her hair, turning it bronze. She hummed while she worked, a quiet sound carried on the breeze. Silas told himself he was fixing the fence post. He wasn't watching her. Not at all. But when she looked up and caught him staring, he nearly hit the fence with the hammer. She smiled a little, just a corner of her mouth. She knew. That night, Faith set her small valise, still the only thing she owned, into the corner of the front room, and left it there. She didn't keep it beside her feet as she always had, didn't carry it from room to room. She left it resting against the wall, like it no longer needed guarding. "I'm tired of carrying it," she said. Silas understood more than her words said. He said nothing. He didn't need to. 7 days later, they rode into town so Faith could mail a letter to her friend back in Ohio. Silas sensed the tension in her before they even saw the rooftops of Willow Creek. Her hands twisted a handkerchief until it looked like rope. Her shoulders sat tight, too tight. "Nobody's gonna bite you," he said gently. She tried to smile. It didn't reach her eyes. Town came slowly into view. A church steeple, the general store, the saloon. A few horses tied outside. People moved along the boardwalk. As they stepped inside the store, the bell jingled, and 3 women turned at once. The talking stopped. Every pair of eyes settled on Faith. Silas felt the heat crawl up his neck. He hadn't wanted this trip. He hadn't wanted to put her in front of watchful eyes so soon. Martha Perkins stood behind the counter. Her smile was sweet, but her eyes were sharp as pins. "Well now," Martha said. "Silas, been a while." Her gaze slid to Faith, slow, searching. "And who might this be?" "She's helping at my place," Silas said. His voice came out stiff. "Helping?" Martha repeated, tasting the word. Faith met her stare with quiet strength. She nodded once, polite but proud. "Good morning, ma'am." Martha blinked, thrown off. "Good morning." Faith mailed her letter. The women whispered behind their hands. Their eyes never left her. Silas felt every second of it. When they stepped back onto the boardwalk, he heard the voices drifting from the open store window. "Mail order bride," Martha said. "Left at the depot like unwanted baggage." Another voice chimed in. "Living with Silas now. Alone." Laughter followed, low and knowing. Faith's shoulders tensed, but she kept walking. She didn't say a word. She didn't look back. The ride home was silent. Dust rose behind the wagon wheels. Faith stared straight ahead. Her jaw had gone tight. Her handkerchief twisted into knots. "They don't matter," Silas said softly. "They think I'm a fallen woman living in sin," she said. Her voice didn't shake. It was too steady. "I know what they think. Doesn't change what's true." She looked at him. Really looked. Something in her eased. "Thank you," she said, "for letting me stand my ground." Life slipped into a fragile calm. Faith cooked meals that tasted like memory. She tended the flowers outside. She mended more shirts. Silas watched her settle into the life she hadn't meant to find, the life that slowly began to belong to both of them. But trouble was coming. It always did. 7 days after the trip to town, a rider appeared. Old Wilbur, the mail carrier. He didn't normally stop at Silas's place. His eyes drifted toward Faith, standing on the porch. "Bank got robbed last night," he said. "Willow Creek. Cleaned out the safe. Folks are riled." Faith stilled. Wilbur's next words came slow, heavy. "Sheriff's talking to everyone who came through town lately. Thought you ought to know." Wilbur's gaze flicked toward Faith again. Too long. Silas felt his fists tighten. Later, when he rode into town for medicine for his horse, Pete Tucker pulled him aside in the saloon. "I'm telling you because your daddy helped mine once," Pete whispered. "Jenkins is spreading talk. Says he saw a woman near town the night before the robbery. Says it was the girl staying with you." Silas's stomach dropped. Jenkins was old, half-blind, known for getting things wrong. But fear didn't care about truth, and the town was already afraid. Silas rode home fast, dust rising behind him. When he stepped into the cabin, he found supper waiting. Beans, cornbread, a candle glowing in the center of the table. Faith smiled faintly. "You looked troubled this morning. Thought a proper meal might help." Silas sat, ate in silence, watched her hands, her calm, her innocence. But doubt was a splinter, small but sharp. Did he trust her because she deserved it, or because he needed to? That night he watched her from the porch as she looked out over the valley. The sky glowed with fading light. Her shoulders rose and fell slowly. She seemed so small against the world. She had not cried once since she arrived. But that night she did. Silently, shoulders shaking in the dark, where she thought he couldn't see. He stood in the shadows and let the sight break him open. He believed her. He always had. But belief wouldn't protect her from what was coming. Because Willow Creek had made up its mind, and the sheriff was on his way. The morning sun had barely cleared the ridge when Silas heard hooves on the hard-packed dirt. Slow, heavy, purposeful. He stepped onto the porch just as Sheriff Harlan rode up, his gray horse blowing steam into the cool air. The sheriff's face was carved from stone, unreadable, the kind of face that did not deliver good news. Faith came to the doorway wiping flour from her hands, her apron dusted white. The sheriff nodded at her politely, but his eyes were cold. "Ma'am," he said. Then to Silas, Mind if I ask her a few questions? Silas stepped down from the porch, placing himself half a step closer to Faith, without even thinking. Ask. They stood in the yard while the morning wind rustled the grass. Harlan pulled a small notebook from his vest, tapped the pencil on the open page. When do you arrive in Willow Creek? 5 weeks ago, Faith said. The 16th of September. Where'd you come from? Cincinnati. I worked at the Morrison textile mill. Anyone who can vouch for where you were the night before the robbery? Faith's jaw tightened. I was here, in this cabin. Harlan lifted his eyes to Silas. You confirm that? She didn't leave, Silas said. Not once. The sheriff wrote something, closed the book, tucked it back into his vest. I ain't decided anything yet, he said, but don't leave the county. Then he leaned closer to Silas, voice dropping low. And if I were you, I'd sleep with one eye open. He rode away, dust trailing behind him. Faith stood frozen in the yard, the letters she had shown him clutched tight against her chest. Her face looked drained of color, as if someone had washed it clean of hope. That night, Silas woke to the sound of fabric rustling. When he stepped into the front room, he found Faith kneeling on the floor beside her open valise. Clothes spilled over the boards, her hands shaking as she stuffed them inside. What are you doing? He asked. I have to leave, she whispered. You heard him. The town thinks I did it. If I stay, they'll blame you too. They'll take your land. Everything your family built. I am not worth that. The words tore something inside him. Sit down, he said. What? Sit down at the table. I'll make coffee. They sat together at 3 a.m, 2 cold cups on the table between them. Faith's hands lay flat on the wood. Her eyes were hollow. I used to believe things happened for a reason, she said softly. My mother taught me that. I held on to it even when she died, even when my father died a week later. But there is no reason in this. A man lies. A woman walks 40 miles on a promise that never existed. A town decides she is guilty because someone has to be. Silas listened. Every word felt like a weight placed gently on his heart. He told her about his parents, how he buried them at 14. How his brother sold the family land and left him with nothing but the cabin. How winter nearly killed him. How he had not trusted another soul since, except her. You believe in reasons, he said. Maybe this is one. Maybe you came here because somebody needed a reminder that not everyone leaves. He stood, his voice rough but steady. You stay or you go. That's your choice. But don't leave thinking you're saving me. He walked to his room. Behind him, he heard her breath shudder, heard her whisper something too soft to understand. Then her footsteps to the spare room, her door closing. She stayed. 2 long weeks passed. Faith worked quietly. She cooked. She cleaned. She tended the flowers that now grew along the porch rail, gold and purple blooms pushing through stubborn soil. But the light in her movements dimmed. The spark in her eyes went soft. Then, one morning, Sheriff Harlan returned. His face looked different now. Heavy. Guilty. Ma'am, he said, removing his hat. We caught the men who robbed the bank. Faith froze on the porch steps. 4 of them, holed up in Ridgewater. They confessed to the Willow Creek job. There was no woman with them. Jenkins got it wrong. The woman he saw had yellow hair. Nothing like yours. Silas felt something unspool inside him, slow and deep. The sheriff lowered his eyes. Miss Faith, I owe you an apology. We all do. Faith didn't move, didn't soften. She simply said, Thank you for telling me, 4 calm words carrying months of hurt. People began arriving days later. Martha Perkins came first with a pie she shoved forward like a peace offering. "Apple," she said, unable to meet Faith's eyes. "Made it this morning." "Thank you, Martha," Faith said, voice polite but distant. The preacher came next, offering a gentle invitation back to Sunday service. Faith said she would think about it. Jenkins never came. But a letter arrived, shaky handwriting, crooked lines, a short apology from an old man who had spoken without seeing. Faith read it once, folded it carefully, and placed it inside the chest. "I'm not ready to forgive him," she said, "but I'm not ready to burn it either." The days warmed. Her garden bloomed strong. The cabin changed too. Clean windows, mended boards, new curtains. She sewed by hand. It felt like a place built by two people instead of one. One evening, Faith stepped onto the porch, drying her hands on a towel, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. She sat beside Silas on the bench, close enough their shoulders touched. "I used to wonder why that man lied to me," she said quietly. "Why he wrote those letters. Why he let me travel all that way." She looked out over the valley, glowing gold in the sunset. "But I don't wonder anymore. If he had met me, I wouldn't be here." Silas swallowed. "Reckon not." "I think," Faith said, turning toward him, "I got the better end of the bargain." Later, she pulled her valise onto the table and opened it. She burned the last of James Hollister's letters in the stove. Then she placed 3 new things inside: the handkerchief Silas had given her, a dried marigold from her garden, and a folded scrap of paper with one word written on it. Home. That night they sat on the porch under the stars. Faith leaned her head gently against Silas's shoulder. After a long moment, she asked, "That first night, why did you stop for me?" Silas thought about it. "Don't know," he said softly. "Just did." Faith smiled, a small, quiet smile filled with peace. "My mother used to say that Providence sends people when we need them most," she whispered. "Not a moment sooner, not a moment later." Silas didn't answer. Instead, he reached for her hand on the bench. Their fingers intertwined naturally, easily, like they had always belonged together. The valley lay wide before them. The stars turned slowly overhead. The cabin behind them glowed warm with lamplight. Faith squeezed his hand. Silas squeezed back. Two people once abandoned by the world sat together in the quiet night, no longer alone, no longer walking separate roads. They had built something new, something gentle, something strong, something that finally felt like home.